The ultrasound photo slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. 6 months pregnant, standing in her billionaire husband's private office, Emma stared at the DNA test on his desk. 3 words changed everything. Paternity, 0%. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the text message she found on his secret phone. Your wife suspects nothing. She's too stupid to notice. I just needed an incubator for an heir. An incubator. That's all she was to him. Emma thought she'd married a prince. She'd left everything behind. Her teaching job, her small town, her entire life, to become Mrs. James Harrison, wife of a tech billionaire. She lived in a Manhattan penthouse. She wore designer clothes. She was living the fairy tale. Until she discovered the fairy tale was a trap. Her husband wasn't who he said he was. The baby she was carrying wasn't what she thought. And the woman he'd been sleeping with for 8 months? She was about to walk through the door with divorce papers and a smile like a knife. This is the story of how Emma Collins lost everything in a single day, how she fought back when everyone said she'd lose, and how she discovered that sometimes the person who looks weakest is actually holding all the power. Because James Harrison made one critical mistake. He underestimated the woman carrying his secrets. This is a story about betrayal, revenge, and a mother's love that nothing, not money, not power, not even the law, could destroy. Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you. The ultrasound photo slipped from Emma Collins's trembling fingers and drifted to the polished marble floor of her husband's private office. 6 months pregnant. Standing in the one room in their Manhattan penthouse she was never supposed to enter. And the DNA test results on James Harrison's mahogany desk said the impossible. Paternity match, 0%. Subject, baby doe, Emma's child. Her hand moved instinctively to her swollen belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing her mother's distress. Emma's knees buckled, and she caught herself on the edge of the desk, her wedding ring clicking against the wood. 3 carats. Platinum. A symbol of forever that now felt like a shackle around her finger, binding her to a man she was beginning to realize she had never truly known. She had come looking for her phone. Such a simple thing, she had forgotten it after breakfast, and James had already left for his office at Harrison AI, the tech company that had made him a billionaire before he turned 40. Their penthouse on the Upper East Side was 3,200 square feet of perfection. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. A kitchen she never cooked in because they had a private chef who prepared meals according to James's exact specifications. A nursery decorated in soft yellows and whites, waiting for the baby girl they had named Lily. Everything was perfect. Everything was a lie. Emma picked up the DNA report with shaking hands. The letterhead read Gene Screen Diagnostics, dated 3 weeks ago. Her eyes scanned the clinical language, trying to make sense of words that seemed to swim on the page. Alleged father, James Alexander Harrison. Test subject, unborn female child, Emma Collins Harrison. Conclusion, probability of paternity, 0.0%. She read it again, then again. The words would not change. They remained there, black ink on white paper, destroying her world one sentence at a time. Her mind raced backward through the past 2 years. The fertility struggles. The disappointment every month when her period came. The tears she cried in the bathroom while James waited outside, impatient for results. James's insistence that they try IVF. The expensive clinic in New Jersey with its sterile white walls and efficient nurses who spoke in hushed, professional tones. The injections she gave herself every night. The hormones that made her emotional and exhausted. The procedures that left her feeling invaded and desperate. The doctor had said the embryo implantation was successful on the first try. A miracle, he called it. Emma had cried tears of joy in James's arms that day, believing that finally, they were going to be parents. She would never forget the look on James's face when the pregnancy test came back positive. He had lifted her off her feet and spun her around their living room, laughing with genuine delight. Or what she thought was genuine delight. Now she wondered if anything about that moment had been real. But if this test was real, if the probability of paternity was truly 0, then whose baby was she carrying? Whose genetic material had been implanted in her body without her knowledge? And more terrifyingly, did James know? Had he known all along? Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump so violently she nearly dropped the paper. A text from her mother, Grace Murphy, back in their hometown of Fairview, Ohio. "How's my grandbaby today? Send me a bump pic. Love you." Emma stared at the message. Her mother had no idea. No one did. Emma herself had no idea until 30 seconds ago that her entire life, her marriage, her pregnancy, everything she thought was real was built on sand, built on lies, built on secrets that were just beginning to surface. She heard the elevator chime in the foyer. Her heart stopped. James was not supposed to be home until evening. He had a full day of meetings scheduled, presentations to investors, the kind of high-stakes business that usually kept him away from the penthouse until well after dark. Emma shoved the DNA report back onto the desk, trying to place it exactly where she had found it, her hands fumbling with panic. She ran from the office, closing the door silently behind her, and positioned herself in the hallway, trying to look casual, trying to look like a woman who had not just discovered her husband's betrayal. The elevator doors opened. James Harrison stepped out, 6 feet tall in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Dark hair perfectly styled with just enough gray at the temples to make him look distinguished. Blue eyes that had once made Emma feel like the only woman in the world. He smiled when he saw her, that easy, confident smile that had charmed her when they first met, that had convinced her to leave everything she knew and loved to build a life with him. "Emma, sweetheart, I forgot my presentation folder. What are you doing here? I thought you had your prenatal yoga class this morning." She forced herself to breathe normally, to keep her voice steady. "I canceled. I was tired. The baby's been kicking it all morning. I couldn't sleep last night, so I thought I'd rest instead." James crossed to her and placed his hand on her belly. She fought the urge to recoil, to push his hand away, to scream at him to tell her the truth. "That's my girl. She's going to be a fighter, just like her dad." Emma's throat tightened. Her dad. Was he, though? Was he really Lily's father? Or was that just another lie in a marriage that now seemed built entirely on deception? "James, can I ask you something?" "Of course." He was already moving past her toward his office, his mind clearly elsewhere, focused on whatever important meeting he needed that folder for. "The IVF, you never really explained the details. I mean, I know we talked about the process, but whose sperm did they use? Yours or a donor's?" James stopped, turned slowly. His expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes, something cold and calculating that Emma had never seen before, or maybe she had seen it and chosen to ignore it. "Mine, obviously. Why would you ask that?" I realized I never saw any of the paperwork. I signed so many forms at the clinic, and I was so emotional and hopeful that I wasn't really paying attention to the details. I wasn't sure exactly what I agreed to." "Emma," he stepped closer, his voice softening into the tone he used when he thought she was being irrational, when he wanted to make her feel like she was overreacting to something insignificant. "You're hormonal. The pregnancy hormones are making you anxious. The baby's making you overthink things. We've talked about this. The embryo is ours, yours and mine. You're carrying our daughter. There's no reason to doubt that." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. She wanted to unsee that paper on his desk, to unhear the doubt now screaming in her mind. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just tired. I haven't been sleeping well." He kissed her forehead, a gesture that once would have comforted her, but now felt patronizing and false. "Go rest. I'll be home for dinner. I'm making reservations at Per Se to celebrate. We need to mark this occasion properly." "Celebrate what?" "The Harrison AI board meeting went exceptionally well this morning. We're announcing a new product line next month. It's going to change everything, put us at the top of the tech world. This is what I've been working toward for years." He grabbed his folder from the office and headed back to the elevator, already pulling out his phone to check messages. "Oh, and Emma, stay out of my office. There are confidential documents in there. Company secrets. I'd hate for you to accidentally see something you shouldn't. You understand, don't you?" The elevator doors closed. Emma stood frozen in the hallway, her husband's warning echoing in her ears like a threat. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called the one person she trusted more than anyone in the world. "Mom," she whispered when Grace answered on the second ring. I need to come home. Emma, honey, what's wrong? You sound upset. I need to see you. Can I come visit? Maybe next week? There was a pause. Grace Murphy had raised Emma alone after Emma's father left when she was 6 years old. She knew her daughter's voice better than anyone, knew when Emma was hiding something, when she was scared, when she needed help but was too proud or too frightened to ask for it directly. Emma Caroline Collins, Grace said, using Emma's full name the way she did when she was serious. Tell me what's going on. Right now. Emma looked at the closed door of James's office. She thought about the DNA report lying on his desk. She thought about the baby growing inside her, the daughter she already loved more than life itself, the child whose paternity was now in question. I think, Emma said slowly, carefully, I think my husband has been lying to me about everything. 6 months earlier, Emma Collins had been happy, or at least she had believed she was happy, which in retrospect might have been the same thing, or might have been the most tragic difference in the world. She stood in the kitchen of the penthouse, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and watched her husband charm a room full of investors with the ease of a man born to power. James had insisted on hosting a small dinner party, 20 of his closest business associates and their wives. Emma had spent the day coordinating with their chef and housekeeper, making sure every detail was flawless, every glass polished, every flower arrangement perfect. She was good at this. Being James Harrison's wife required skills she had never imagined needing when she was a kindergarten teacher in Fairview, Ohio, reading picture books to 5-year-olds and wiping paint off tiny hands. She had learned how to discuss wine pairings with sommeliers who looked down their noses at anyone who could not distinguish between a Burgundy and a Bordeaux. She had learned how to dress for galas at the Met, which designers were acceptable and which were too pedestrian. She had learned how to smile and nod while men talked about market disruptions and venture capital and acquisition strategies, topics that once would have bored her to tears but now formed the background noise of her daily life. James caught her eye from across the room and winked. She smiled back, feeling a warmth in her chest. 3 years ago, he had walked into the tiny art gallery where she was working a second job on weekends, trying to make extra money to help her mother with medical bills. He was in town visiting his mother, who had retired to a suburb outside Cleveland. He asked Emma about a painting, a landscape of the Ohio countryside at sunset. They talked for an hour about art and life and dreams. He asked her to dinner. 6 months later, he proposed on a beach in Malibu, the Pacific Ocean stretching out behind him, a 3-carat diamond ring in his hand. Emma's friends back home thought it was a fairy tale. Small-town girl meets billionaire prince. Cinderella at the ball. Grace, her mother, had been more cautious, as mothers often are when they see their daughters rushing towards something that seems too good to be true. Emma, baby, are you sure about this? Grace had asked the night before the wedding. You barely know him. You've been dating less than a year, and you love teaching. You love your life here in Fairview. You love your kids at school. Are you really ready to give all that up to move to New York and become someone's wife? But Emma had been sure, so sure. James was brilliant, ambitious, and he loved her. He said she was different from the women in his world. Real, authentic, unspoiled by money and fame. He wanted to take care of her, to give her a life she could never have imagined, to show her a world beyond the small-town boundaries of Fairview, Ohio. So she left. She left her classroom full of 5-year-olds who called her Miss Emma and drew her pictures of flowers with crayons. She left her mother's small house with the creaky porch swinging where they used to sit on summer evenings, drinking sweet tea and watching fireflies. She left her best friend Sarah, who had been in her life since 2nd grade. She became Mrs. Emma Harrison, and she learned to live in a world of private jets and charity auctions and magazine profiles that called her husband a visionary genius who was revolutionizing artificial intelligence. It was not always easy. James worked long hours, often leaving the penthouse before dawn and returning well after midnight. He traveled constantly, flying to San Francisco and London and Tokyo for meetings with investors and partners and competitors. And he had strong opinions about how Emma should spend her time, opinions that became clearer the longer they were married. When she mentioned maybe volunteering at a school in the city, teaching underprivileged children to read, he gently discouraged it. You're my wife now, sweetheart. You represent me in Harrison AI. I need you focused on our life, on building our home, on preparing for our future family. There will be time for charity work later, but right now I need you here. So she took prenatal yoga classes at an expensive studio in Tribeca. She had lunch with the other tech wives, women who spent their days planning fundraisers and discussing their husbands' latest acquisitions. She decorated the penthouse with the help of an interior designer who charged $500 an hour. And she waited for the day they would have a baby because James wanted children, had always wanted children, had made it clear from their first date that family was important to him, that he envisioned a future with sons and daughters who would carry on his legacy. Except the baby did not come. Month after month, the pregnancy test came back negative. Emma would stare at the single line on the test, willing a second line to appear, and then throw it away before James could see it. She would cry in the bathroom, quiet tears that she wiped away before emerging with a smile. Emma's doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Patricia Reeves, said there was no medical reason she could not conceive. Emma was young, healthy, her reproductive system functioning normally. Sometimes these things just took time. Some couples tried for years before getting pregnant. There was no need to panic yet. But James grew impatient. He wanted results. He wanted efficiency. That was how he approached everything in life. When Harrison AI faced a technical problem, he threw resources at it until it was solved. When a competitor threatened his market share, he acquired them or crushed them. James Harrison did not accept failure, and he did not accept waiting. So after a year of trying naturally, they tried IVF. Emma remembered sitting in the clinic, a modern facility in northern New Jersey with white walls and abstract art that was probably supposed to be calming, but instead made her feel sterile and clinical. She held James's hand, listening to the doctor explain the process in careful, measured tones. They would harvest her eggs through a minor surgical procedure. They would fertilize them with James's sperm in a laboratory. They would culture the embryos for several days, select the healthiest one, and implant it in Emma's uterus. It was science. It was modern medicine. It had a high success rate. It would work. And it did. On the first try, Emma was pregnant. She would never forget the moment she told James. She had taken 3 pregnancy tests to be sure, watching the double lines appear with hands that shook so badly she could barely hold the plastic sticks. When James came home that evening, she led him to the nursery they had already painted, already furnished with a crib and a changing table and shelves waiting for books. We did it, she said, showing him the tests. We're pregnant. He had lifted her off her feet and spun her around the empty nursery, laughing with pure joy. We did it, Emma. We're going to be parents. This is everything I wanted. Everything I planned for. Our child is going to change the world. The pregnancy had been easy. No morning sickness, no complications, just a growing belly and the flutter of movement that grew stronger every week until Emma could feel distinct kicks and rolls. She spent hours in the nursery, folding tiny clothes, imagining the moment she would hold her daughter for the first time. Because it was a girl. The ultrasound had confirmed it at 20 weeks. A daughter. Lily. They had chosen the name together, James saying it was perfect. Classic but not old-fashioned. Strong but feminine. Emma never suspected anything was wrong. Why would she? James was attentive when he was home, asking about her symptoms, attending the important doctor's appointments when his schedule allowed. He was excited, planning for their future, talking about teaching Lily to code when she was old enough, taking her to the office to see how companies were built, raising her to be as brilliant and ambitious as he was. But now, standing in that same kitchen 6 months later, Emma replayed every conversation, every moment, looking for the cracks she had missed, looking for the signs that should have told her something was terribly, terribly wrong. The night James had come home late from the clinic after they harvested her eggs, his shirt wrinkled, his expression tense and distracted. She had asked if everything was okay. He said the procedure was stressful, that was all. Watching them extract her eggs had been harder than he expected. But now, thinking back, she wondered what had really happened that day. The way he had insisted she not worry about the medical details. I'll handle the paperwork, sweetheart. I'll make sure all the forms are filed correctly. You just focus on staying healthy and taking your vitamins and preparing your body for the pregnancy. The separate bank accounts. Emma had her own account with a monthly allowance, enough to cover personal expenses, but the real money was in James's name. The investment portfolios, the real estate holdings, the stocks in Harrison AI, the prenuptial agreement his lawyers had drawn up before the wedding, which Emma had signed without reading carefully because she trusted him, because she never imagined their marriage ending, because she was in love and 29 years old and naive enough to believe that love conquered all. The way he sometimes looked at her as if she were a beautiful painting he owned, something to display but not to truly know. Something decorative and pleasing, but ultimately replaceable. Emma had ignored all of it because she loved him, because she wanted to believe in the fairy tale, because admitting that her marriage might be built on lies would mean admitting that she had made a terrible mistake, that she had given up everything she loved for a man who never truly valued her. Now she was not sure what was real anymore, not sure who James Harrison actually was, not sure if the baby growing inside her was even his child, and she was running out of time to find out. Emma did not go to Ohio immediately. She told her mother she was fine, just tired, just experiencing the normal emotional ups and downs of pregnancy that every book and website warned about. But Grace Murphy had not raised Emma alone through poverty and hardship by being easily fooled. Grace knew when her daughter was lying. Emma Caroline Collins, Grace said over the phone, her voice firm but loving. What is really going on? And don't tell me it's hormones. I carried you for 9 months. I know the difference between hormones and genuine fear. Talk to me, baby. Nothing, Mom, I promise. I'm just overwhelmed. The penthouse feels so big and empty during the day when James is at work. I'm lonely, I think. Maybe I should look into joining some kind of mother's group or prenatal class where I can make friends. Is James treating you right? Emma hesitated a second too long. Just a heartbeat, just a breath, but Grace heard it. If he's hurting you, if he's doing anything that makes you feel unsafe, he's not. He's never hurt me. He's never even raised his voice to me. He's just busy. The company's going through a big transition, some kind of major product launch. I barely see him anymore. He's gone before I wake up and comes home after I'm asleep. It's like living with a ghost. That part was true. Over the past month, James had been staying late at the office more nights than not. When he was home, he was distracted, always on his phone, always in his office, behind closed doors, taking calls that he said were too confidential to have in front of her. Emma had tried to be understanding. She knew how demanding his work was. She had signed up for this life, for the reality of being married to a man who was building an empire. But sometimes, late at night when she could not sleep because the baby was pressing on her lungs and her mind would not stop racing, she would lie awake in their enormous bed and wonder if the man she married was the man she thought she knew. 3 days after finding the DNA report, Emma discovered the second phone. She was doing laundry, something the housekeeper usually handled. But Emma needed to keep her hands busy. She needed to feel useful, to feel like she was doing something other than waiting and worrying and trying not to panic. She was sorting through James's gym bag, pulling out sweaty workout clothes, when she found it wedged in the inside pocket. A sleek black iPhone, no case, no identifying marks, password protected. Her first thought was that it was a work phone. James had mentioned needing a separate device for confidential business communications, something secure that could not be hacked or compromised. But when she tried to turn it on, the lock screen showed a photo she had never seen. James with a woman, a beautiful blonde woman in her mid-20s with perfect skin and bright blue eyes, laughing, his arm around her waist in a way that was definitely not professional or platonic. Emma's hands went numb. She stared at the photo, trying to understand what she was seeing. Who was this woman? When was this photo taken? Why did James have a secret phone with her picture on it? She tried several passwords. Their anniversary, his birthday, her birthday, Lily's due date. Nothing worked. The phone remained locked, taunting her with that image of her husband and a stranger. She put the phone back exactly where she found it, her movements mechanical and precise. She walked to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left in her stomach but bile and fear. When James came home that night, she was in bed, pretending to read a book about preparing for childbirth. He kissed her cheek and asked about her day. She said it was fine. He said he needed to catch up on emails and disappeared into his office, closing the door behind him. Emma lay in the dark and made a decision. She needed to know the truth. All of it. Every lie, every secret, every betrayal. Even if it destroyed her. Even if it meant losing everything, she needed to know. The next morning, after James left for work in his usual rush of expensive cologne and pressed suits, Emma called a locksmith. She told him she had forgotten the password to her iPhone and needed it unlocked. The locksmith, a middle-aged man with kind eyes who did not ask questions, had it open in 20 minutes. The phone belonged to James. That much was immediately clear. The messages were all there. Hundreds of texts between him and the blonde woman, whose name was Victoria Reed, Tori. Emma sat on the floor of the bedroom, her back against the bed, and read every single one. She read them in chronological order, starting from 8 months ago, watching the affair unfold in real time through text messages and photos and voice memos. Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Suite 4201 at the plaza. Wear that dress I like. Your wife suspects nothing. She's too stupid to notice. Too trusting. It's almost sad how naive she is. I needed an incubator for an heir. Emma's perfect for that. Good genetics, healthy, obedient. But you're the one I actually love. You're the one I want to spend my life with. After the baby's born, I'll divorce her. Then we can finally be together publicly. No more hiding. No more pretending I care about that boring little teacher I married. Emma read until the words blurred together, until she could not tell if she was crying or if her eyes were just too tired to focus anymore. She read about their affair, which had been going on for 8 months, which meant it started right around the time Emma got pregnant. She read about James's plan to wait until after Lily was born, establish himself as a devoted father, then file for divorce and fight for full custody. She read Tori's complaints that James was spending too much time pretending to care about his pregnant wife, that she was tired of being the secret, that she wanted to be Mrs. Harrison. And then she found the message that made her blood turn to ice. From James to Tori, sent 2 weeks ago. Did you get the DNA test results I asked for? I need to make sure everything's in order before the baby comes. If Emma finds out the embryo wasn't actually mine, this whole plan falls apart. The board needs to believe I'm a stable family man with biological children. Make sure those records are buried deep. Emma's vision tunneled. She read the message again, and again, and again. The embryo wasn't his. James had lied to her. The IVF clinic had not used his sperm. They had used a donor's, which meant the baby Emma was carrying, the daughter she had already named and loved and imagined, was not biologically James's child. But why? Why would he lie about something like that? Why go through the charade of the expense and the procedures and the emotional toll if he was just going to use donor sperm anyway? She scrolled further back in the messages, her hands shaking so badly she could barely control the phone. She found the answer in a conversation from 2 years ago, before they started IVF, before Emma even knew there was a problem. From James to Tori. The doctor confirmed it today. I'm infertile. Childhood mumps complications damaged everything permanently. I can't have biological children, which is a disaster for the succession plan. The board won't approve me as permanent CEO unless I have a family, unless I present the image of a stable married man with heirs. So we'll do IVF with a donor, and Emma will never know the difference. She's too trusting to question it, too in love to doubt me. It's perfect. From Tori. And after the baby's born, what then? From James. Then I divorce her, take custody, and marry you. We raise the child as ours. Emma goes back to her pathetic little life in Ohio, and we move on. Simple. Emma dropped the phone. She could not breathe, could not think. Her husband was infertile. He had lied to her about the IVF. He had impregnated her with a stranger's child without her knowledge or consent, all so he could maintain his image as a family man for his company's board of directors. And he was planning to take Lily away from her the moment she was born. Emma stood up slowly, gripping the edge of the bed for support. She walked to the nursery and stood in the doorway, looking at the crib with its mobile of tiny stars, the rocking chair where she had imagined singing lullabies, the shelves full of books she had collected, ready to read to her daughter every night before bed. She placed both hands on her belly. Lily kicked, strong and insistent, as if she knew something was wrong, as if she was trying to comfort her mother from the inside. I won't let him take you, Emma whispered to her unborn daughter. I don't care what I have to do. I don't care what it costs. I won't let him win. You're mine. You're my baby. And I will fight for you until my last breath. She pulled out her own phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she needed. Detective Marcus Blake, her mother's oldest friend. A man who had known Emma since she was 6 years old, who had taught her to ride a bike, who had come to her high school graduation and cried like she was his own daughter. Marcus, she said when he answered on the first ring, I need your help, and I need you to keep it a secret from my mom. If she knows, she'll try to stop me from doing what needs to be done. Emma, what's going on? You sound terrified. My husband is planning to steal my baby, and I need to stop him before it's too late. Marcus Blake had been a detective with the Cleveland Police Department for 23 years before retiring to do private investigation work. He had seen the worst of humanity in those years. He had worked homicides and kidnappings and domestic violence cases that made him lose sleep for weeks. But when Emma Collins called him with that kind of desperation in her voice, something in his chest tightened with a protective fury he had not felt in years. He remembered the bright little girl who used to bring him lemonade when he visited Grace on hot summer days. He remembered teaching her to fish at Miller's Pond, watching her concentrate so hard on baiting the hook that her tongue stuck out between her teeth. He remembered her high school graduation, how proud Grace had been, how Emma had hugged him and said he was like the father she never had. That little girl was now a grown woman, 6 months pregnant, trapped in a nightmare she could not have imagined. Tell me everything, Marcus said, his voice calm and professional despite the anger building in his gut. Start from the very beginning. Don't leave anything out. Emma told him about the DNA test she had found on James's desk. She told him about the second phone, about the messages between James and Tori, about the affair that had been going on for 8 months. She told him about the IVF lie, about James's infertility, about his plan to take custody of Lily the moment she was born and divorce Emma with nothing but a pathetic settlement. By the time she finished, she was crying so hard she could barely speak, gasping for breath between words. Emma, listen to me very carefully, Marcus said. Do not confront him yet. If James knows you found the phone, if he knows you've read those messages, he'll move up his timeline. He'll do something drastic. We need evidence. Real, legal, admissible evidence. Can you forward me those messages from the phone? Yes, I took screenshots of everything before I put the phone back. I'll send them to you right now. Good girl, smart. Now listen, delete those screenshots from your phone after you send them to me. If James checks your device, I don't want him finding anything. I'm going to dig into his company, his finances, his relationship with this Tory woman. There's more going on here than just an affair, Emma. Men like James Harrison don't lie about paternity just for fun. There's a bigger reason, and I'm going to find it. Emma wiped her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. Marcus, what if he finds out what I'm doing? What if he takes Lily before I can stop him? He won't. I promise you, we're going to figure this out. But you need to act normal. Can you do that? Can you pretend everything is fine? I don't know. I don't know if I can look at him without screaming, without asking him how he could do this to me. You can. You're stronger than you think, Emma. I've known you your whole life. You have your mother's spine. You're tougher than you realize. You can do this. Emma nodded, even though Marcus could not see her. Okay, what do I do next? Forward me everything, then delete the evidence from your phone. Put the second phone back exactly where you found it. If James checks his gym bag and it's missing, he'll know someone found it. Then I'm going to make some calls. I have contacts in New York, people who owe me favors. We're going to build a case against this son of a bitch. And Emma, I need you to do one more thing. What? Start documenting everything. Keep a journal. Write down every conversation with James, every suspicious behavior, every time he's late coming home or takes a mysterious call. We're going to need a paper trail. Can you do that? Yes, I can do that. Good. And Emma, I'm proud of you. It takes guts to fight back when you're scared. You're doing the right thing. Emma did exactly as Marcus instructed. She forwarded the messages, deleted the evidence, and put the second phone back in James's gym bag. Then she went to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked like a woman on the edge of collapse. She splashed cold water on her face, applied concealer under her eyes, and forced herself to breathe slowly and deeply like she had learned in prenatal yoga. When James came home that evening, Emma was in the kitchen, pretending to review paint samples for the nursery accent wall. He kissed the top of her head and asked what she wanted for dinner. "I'm not very hungry," she said, proud that her voice sounded almost normal. "Maybe just soup, something light." "You need to eat, Emma. You're eating for two now. The baby needs nutrition." He said it with a smile, as if he cared, as if he had not spent the past year lying to her about literally everything that mattered. Emma wanted to throw the paint samples in his face. She wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused her. Instead, she smiled back and said, "You're right. Soup sounds good. Maybe that tomato bisque from the place you like." They ate together in the dining room, James talking about his day, about the new product launch Harrison AI was planning, about the board meeting scheduled for next month, where they would announce the revolutionary AI platform that was going to change the tech industry forever. Emma nodded and made appropriate responses, all while imagining what it would be like to tell him she knew everything, to watch his face as she revealed that his perfect plan was falling apart. But she did not. She played her part, the loving wife, the trusting woman who believed every word he said, the naive teacher from Ohio who was too stupid to notice when she was being used. That night, after James fell asleep, Emma lay awake and thought about what Marcus had said. There's more going on here. Men like James Harrison don't just lie for fun. What was James hiding? And how far would he go to keep his secrets buried? 3 days later, Emma got part of her answer. She was at her prenatal appointment when her doctor, the kind Dr. Patricia Reeves, handed her a form to sign. "This is just routine," Dr. Reeves said, but her expression was uncomfortable. "But I need you to sign consent for us to release your full medical records to your husband's attorney." Emma froze, the pen hovering over the paper. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your husband's attorney, a Mr. Arthur Pendleton, requested your complete medical history, prenatal records, psychological evaluations, if any exist, family medical history, everything we have on file. It's unusual, but he said it was for insurance purpose related to the baby's birth." "Did James tell you to do this?" Reeves frowned, clearly sensing something was wrong. "His attorney called my office yesterday. I assumed you knew about it. I wouldn't have brought it up if I thought it was a surprise." Emma's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "I need to make a call. Can you give me a minute? Don't do anything with that form yet." She stepped into the hallway and dialed Marcus with shaking fingers. "He's building a case against me," she said without preamble the moment Marcus answered. "He's trying to get my medical records." "Marcus, what is he doing?" Marcus's voice was grim. "He's preparing for a custody battle. If he can prove you're mentally or physically unfit to be a mother, he can take Lily the moment she's born." "Emma, listen to me very carefully. Do not sign that consent form. Do not give him access to your medical records. And get yourself a lawyer. Today. Right now." "I can't afford a lawyer, Marcus. All the money is his. The bank accounts are in his name. I have my monthly allowance account, but there's maybe $3,000 in there. That's not enough to fight someone like James. I know someone, a lawyer who takes pro bono cases for women in situations like yours. Her name is Rachel Williams. She's tough as nails and she hates men who abuse their power. I'm calling her right now. But Emma, you need to think about leaving. You need to get out of that house before James makes his move." "Leave? Marcus, where am I supposed to go? This is my home. This is where the nursery is. All of Lily's things are here." "None of that matters if James takes her from you. Pack a bag. Come to your mother's house. Come to my place. I don't care where you go, but you need to get out of that penthouse before James realizes you're onto him. Trust me, Emma. I've seen this before. Men like him don't play fair. And if you stay, you're going to lose everything." Emma hung up the phone, her mind racing. She went back into the exam room and told Dr. Reeves she would not be signing the consent form, that there must have been some kind of misunderstanding with James's attorney, that she would need to speak with her husband before authorizing the release of any medical records. Dr. Reeves looked relieved. Good, I'm glad you're being cautious. Something about that request felt off to me. I'm here if you need anything, Emma. Anything at all. Em Moss took a taxi back to the penthouse, calculating how much time she had. James usually did not come home until after 8 p.m. She had maybe 4 hours to pack a bag and get out before he returned and realized something was wrong. She grabbed a suitcase from the closet and started throwing things inside. Clothes, toiletries, her laptop with all her personal files, the ultrasound photos she kept in a special album, her grandmother's necklace, the only piece of jewelry she owned that meant anything to her. She was moving on autopilot, her brain numb with fear and adrenaline. She heard the elevator chime. Her heart stopped. James was home early, 3 hours early. Emma shoved the suitcase under the bed and ran to the living room, forcing herself to look calm, forcing her face into a neutral expression. James stepped out of the elevator, and he was not alone. The blonde woman from the phone photo was with him. Victoria Reed, Tori. She was even more stunning in person than in pictures, dressed in a white Chanel dress that probably cost more than Emma used to make in 6 months of teaching. Her hair perfect, her makeup flawless, her smile sharp as a knife. Emma's breath caught in her throat. James, what's going on? James's expression was cold, colder than she had ever seen it. The mask was off. The charming husband was gone. In his place was a stranger who looked at her with something close to contempt. Emma, we need to talk, he said. This is Victoria Reed, my attorney. She has some papers for you to sign. Emma looked at Tori, who was definitely not his attorney. She was his mistress, and she was holding a manila folder like it was a weapon. What papers? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tori smiled, and it was the cruelest smile Emma had ever seen. Divorce papers, sweetie. Didn't James tell you? Your little fairy tale is over. It's time for you to go back to your pumpkin patch in Ohio. Emma stared at the woman standing in her living room. The woman her husband had been sleeping with for 8 months while Emma carried his child. And something inside her snapped. Not into tears, not into collapse. Into a fury so pure and cold it felt like ice water in her veins. Get out of my house, Emma said, her voice low and steady and deadly calm. Tori laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your house, honey? This penthouse is in James's name. You don't own anything here. Not the furniture, not the art on the walls, not even the clothes in your closet. You're just a tenant who's being evicted. James stepped forward, his hands in his pockets, completely relaxed. Emma, let's be reasonable adults about this. Victoria is here to help facilitate a clean, simple separation. If you sign these papers right now, you'll receive $50,000 and a smooth transition out of my life. No muss, no fuss. If you fight this, if you make things difficult, things will get very ugly for you very quickly. Emma looked at her husband, the man she had loved with everything in her, the man she had trusted with her future, her body, her child. And she saw him clearly for the first time. He was not the prince from a fairy tale. He was a predator who had hunted her, trapped her, and was now discarding her like garbage. No, Emma said. No. James raised an eyebrow, amused. Emma, you don't have a choice here. I'm not signing anything, and I'm not leaving. This is my home. That's my baby. She placed her hands protectively on her belly, meeting his eyes with defiance. Tori rolled her eyes dramatically. Actually, about that baby, James, should we tell her the truth? Or should we let her figure it out on her own? This is kind of fun, watching her squirm. James shot Tori a warning look, but she ignored him. She was enjoying this too much, savoring every moment of Emma's pain. See, Emma, Tori said, stepping closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The thing is, that baby you're carrying, it's not James's. He's infertile, completely unable to have children. Didn't he tell you? The embryo they implanted at the clinic came from a sperm donor. Some random guy who sold his genetic material for a few $100, which means legally, biologically, James has no claim to the child at all. Emma felt the floor tilt beneath her, even though she already knew this part, even though she had read it in the messages. Hearing it said out loud, hearing it confirmed with such casual cruelty, made it real in a way that still hit like a physical blow. But here's the really fun part, Tori continued, clearly relishing the revelation. The donor egg they used? It was mine, my genetic material. Which means you're not just carrying a stranger's baby, sweetheart. You're carrying my baby. James and I planned this a year ago. He needed an heir for his company, for the board, for his image. And I didn't want to ruin my body with pregnancy or deal with all that disgusting swelling and stretch marks. So we found ourselves a nice, naive little incubator. And that was you. Emma could not breathe, could not process what she was hearing, even though she had suspected something like this, even though the messages had hinted at it. You're lying. Am I? Tori pulled a paper from the manila folder and tossed it onto the coffee table with a theatrical flourish. IVF clinic records. Donor egg, Victoria Reed. Donor sperm, anonymous. Gestational carrier, Emma Collins Harrison. You signing the consent forms yourself, sweetie. You just didn't bother reading them carefully. Too trusting, too in love, too stupid. Emma grabbed the paper with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the dense medical terminology. But the names were clear. Victoria Reed, biological mother. Anonymous donor, biological father. Emma Harrison, gestational carrier. She had been used, her body, her love, her trust, her entire life for the past 3 years. All of it had been a lie, a carefully constructed trap designed to give James what he needed while costing Emma everything. Wait, Emma whispered, looking at James. Why would you do this to me? I loved you. I gave up everything for you. Was James sighed, as if she were being tedious, as if this conversation was boring him. Emma, you were perfect for this role. Young, healthy, desperate to please me. You came from nothing, you had no connections, no money, no power. You would have done anything I asked because you were so grateful that someone like me would pay attention to someone like you. And you did. You played your part beautifully. You carried our child without asking questions. You were the perfect little incubator. Our child, Emma repeated, the words tasting like poison. You keep saying that, but she's not yours. According to what you just told me, she's not either of yours. She's mine. I've carried her for 6 months. I've felt every kick. I've talked to her every night. She knows my voice. She knows I'm her mother. You can't take her from me. Tori laughed again, that awful shattering sound. Actually, we can. The donor agreement you signed, which you didn't read because you're functionally illiterate when it comes to legal documents, gives James full parental rights as the intended parent. You're classified as a gestational surrogate, and once the baby's born, your job is done. James will raise her with me. You'll get your $50,000 severance package and a nice little non-disclosure agreement to sign. Be grateful, honestly. Most surrogates don't get nearly as much, and they don't get the privilege of living in a penthouse for 3 years. Emma looked at James, searching for any trace of the man she thought she married, any hint of compassion or regret or human feeling. You can't be serious. You can't actually believe you're going to take my baby and raise her with your mistress, and I'm just going to quietly disappear. She's not my mistress, James said, his voice matter of fact. She's my partner. We've been together longer than you and I have, Emma. You were always temporary, a means to an end, a problem that needed solving. I needed a baby for the board, for my image, for the succession plan. You provided that service. Now your usefulness has expired. Emma's knees buckled. She sat down hard on the couch, her hands still protectively on her belly. Lily was kicking frantically now, agitated, as if she could sense her mother's distress, as if she was trying to fight back from inside the womb. I won't let you, Emma said, her voice barely audible. I'll fight you. I'll take you to court. I'll tell everyone what you did. I'll expose you. Go ahead, James said, spreading his hands wide. Please do. But you should know that you signed a prenuptial agreement that says you get nothing in a divorce. $0, 0 assets. You have no money, no job, no resources. I have the best legal team in New York. I have unlimited funds. I have power and connections you can't even imagine. You'll lose, Emma, and when you do, I'll make sure you never see Lily again. I'll bury you so deep in legal proceedings that no one will even remember your name. You'll be a footnote, A mistake I made when I was younger and less careful. Tori knelt down in front of Emma, bringing herself to eye level, her smile saccharine, sweet, and venomous. Here's some friendly advice, sweetheart. Take the 50,000. It's more money than you've ever had in your pathetic life. Go back to your little town in Ohio. Get yourself a trailer and a cat. Forget this ever happened. Because if you try to fight us, if you tried to stand in our way, we will destroy you utterly and completely. And trust me when I say you don't want to see what that looks like. Emma looked into Tori's eyes and saw nothing but cruelty and emptiness. She looked at James and saw the same. They were not human beings. They were monsters wearing human faces. Get out, Emma said quietly. Emma, be reasonable, James started. Get out, Emma screamed, standing up, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. Both of you, get out of my house right now. Get out before I call the police. Get out before I lose what's left of my mind. James exchanged a glance with Tori, something passing between them silently. Then he shrugged, completely unbothered. Fine, we'll give you 24 hours to think it over, to let reality sink in. But Emma, if you're still here tomorrow, if you haven't signed those papers, I'm having you physically removed by security. And I'll make sure everyone in New York knows you're an unstable woman who tried to steal my child. I'll destroy whatever reputation you have left. Do you understand me? They left. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime. Emma stood alone in the enormous living room, surrounded by expensive furniture and art she had never chosen, in a home that had never really been hers, with a baby in her belly that two monsters wanted to steal. She sank to the floor, her back against the couch, and let herself cry. Great, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep in her chest, somewhere primal and unbroken. She called Marcus. They came here, she said, her voice hollow and destroyed. They told me everything, Marcus. They admitted it all. They used me as a surrogate without my knowledge. The baby, Lily, she's biologically theirs. Tori's egg, donor sperm, my body. And they have legal documents that say I'm just a gestational carrier. Marcus, I don't know if I have any rights at all. I don't know if I can win this. Marcus was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was steel. Emma, pack your bag right now. I'm coming to get you. I'm leaving Ohio in 10 minutes, and I'll be there by tonight. We're taking you somewhere safe, somewhere James can't find you, and then we're going to fight. Do you hear me? We're going to fight with everything we have. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face, dripping onto her hands. Okay, I'm packing now. She hung up and forced herself to stand. She went to the bedroom and pulled the suitcase out from under the bed where she had hidden it. She finished packing, adding more clothes, grabbing the folder with all her medical records, taking photos of the nursery with her phone so she would have something to remember, something to hold on to. As she zipped up the suitcase, her phone rang. It was her mother. Emma, baby, Marcus just called me. Grace's voice was thick with fury and tears. He told me everything that's happening. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. But you listen to me right now. You come home. You come home to Ohio right by this minute, and we're going to figure this out together. Do you hear me? Mom, I don't know what to do, Emma sobbed. I don't know how to fight him. He has everything. Money, lawyers, power connections. I have nothing. I'm nobody. I'm just a teacher from Ohio who was stupid enough to fall in love with a monster. You have me, Grace said fiercely. You have Marcus. You have your daughter inside you who needs you to be strong. And you have yourself, Emma. You're my daughter. You're stronger than you know. You've survived losing your father. You've survived 3 years with a man who didn't deserve you. And you're going to survive this. Now get in Marcus's car when he arrives and come home. We're going to war. Emma sat in the back of Marcus Blake's car as they drove through the Lincoln Tunnel, leaving Manhattan behind in a blur of yellow lights and concrete. She watched the city skyline disappear in the rearview mirror and felt like she was leaving herself behind too, leaving behind the woman who had lived in that penthouse, who had believed in fairy tales and happy endings and the fundamental goodness of the man she married. That woman was gone. In her place was someone Emma did not recognize yet, someone harder and colder and more determined than she had ever been. The drive to Fairview, Ohio took 8 hours through the night. Emma slept for most of it, exhausted from crying, from fear, from the sheer emotional weight of carrying a child she might lose. When she woke, they were pulling into the driveway of her mother's small house, the house Emma had grown up in, with its peeling paint and creaky porch swing and tiny garden where Grace grew tomatoes every summer. Grace Murphy was waiting on the porch despite the late hour, wrapped in a cardigan against the autumn chill, and the moment Emma saw her mother's face, she broke completely. She stumbled out of the car and into Grace's arms, sobbing like a child, unable to stand on her own. "I've got you," Grace whispered, stroking Emma's hair the way she had when Emma was little and had nightmares. "I've got you, baby. You're safe now. You're home." But Emma did not feel safe. She felt like she was drowning, like the water was closing over her head and she could not find the surface. Over the next week, while Emma tried to process the wreckage of her life, Marcus and Rachel Williams, the pro bono lawyer Marcus had contacted, began digging into the legal nightmare James had created. They discovered a pattern of fraud at the IVF clinic, evidence that James had bribed the director to falsify consent forms and implant Tori's egg without Emma's explicit knowledge. It was illegal. It was monstrous. But proving it in court would be nearly impossible. "The problem," Rachel explained one afternoon, sitting at Grace's worn kitchen table with files spread everywhere, "is that James has already filed for custody. He's claiming that because the embryo was created with his stated intention to become a father, with his financial resources funding the entire process, he has parental rights under New York law. And because you signed documents at the clinic, even if you didn't fully understand what you were signing, a judge might rule in his favor based on the technical legality of the gestational carrier agreement. So I lose my baby," Emma said flatly, staring at her hands. "That's what you're saying. The law sides with him because he's rich and powerful and I'm nobody." "Not necessarily," Rachel said firmly. "We can fight this. We can expose the fraud. We can bring criminal charges against the clinic director and potentially against James himself for reproductive coercion. But Emma, I need you to understand something. This is going to be a long, brutal battle. James has resources we don't have. He can drag this out for years. He can bury us in legal fees and motions and appeals. And even if we win, even if we prove the fraud, there's no guarantee you'll get full custody. The best we might hope for is shared custody, which means Lily spending half her time with him." Emma placed her hands on her belly, feeling Lily's movements. She was 7 months pregnant now, growing larger every day, running out of time. "I'll do whatever it takes," Emma said. "I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how hard it is. I won't give up. I can." Rachel nodded, respect clear in her eyes. "Then we fight." The next blow came 3 days later, delivered by a court messenger who handed Emma papers that made her physically ill. James's legal team had filed a motion claiming Emma was mentally unstable and posed a danger to the unborn child. They had dug up her old medical records from when she was 23 and had gone to therapy after her father's sudden death from a heart attack. They twisted her very normal grief counseling into evidence of severe psychological problems, claiming she had a history of depression and instability that made her unfit to be a mother. The judge, swayed by James's expensive lawyers and extensive documentation, ordered an emergency psychiatric evaluation. Emma was taken to a court-mandated facility where she was held for 72 hours while doctors assessed her mental state. She was strip-searched by disinterested nurses who treated her like a criminal. She was questioned for hours about her childhood, her marriage, her feelings about the pregnancy. She was treated like she was insane, like she was the problem, while the man who had lied to her and used her and planned to steal her child faced no consequences at all. When she was finally released after 3 days that felt like 3 years, Grace picked her up. Emma did not speak during the entire drive home. She went straight to her childhood bedroom, the same room where she had dreamed of her future when she was a teenager, and lay down on the narrow twin bed, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. She had lost everything: her home, her husband, her dignity, her sense of self, and soon she would lose her daughter. That night, Emma found herself standing in the bathroom at 2 in the morning, staring at a bottle of her mother's sleeping pills that sat in the medicine cabinet. She thought about how easy it would be to swallow them all, to make the pain stop, to escape from the nightmare her life had become. She unscrewed the cap and poured a handful of pills into her palm. She placed her other hand on her belly and Lily kicked hard, almost violently, as if she knew what her mother was thinking, as if she was fighting for both their lives. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered to her unborn daughter, tears running down her face. "I'm so sorry I can't protect you. I'm sorry I'm not strong enough." The bathroom door opened. Grace stood there in her nightgown, her face pale with fear. She saw the pills in Emma's hand and crossed the room in 2 strides, slapping them away. Little white pills scattered across the tile floor like deadly confetti. "Don't you dare," Grace said, her voice shaking with fury and terror. "Don't you dare give up. Emma Caroline Collins, that baby needs you alive. That baby needs her mother fighting for her, not giving up. And you're stronger than this. You are my daughter, which means you have more strength in you than you realize." Emma collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. I can't fight him. He's too powerful. I'm going to lose everything." "Then we'll find a way to win," Grace said fiercely. "Marcus has a lead. He thinks there's something very wrong with James's company, something that could change everything. So you're not giving up. You're going to survive this. And when Lily is born, she's going to have a mother who fought like hell to keep her safe." Emma looked up at her mother through her tears. "What kind of lead?" "The kind that ends careers and destroys empires," Marcus said from the doorway. And Emma had not even heard him arrive. "I've been digging into Harrison AI's public filings and financial statements. James's company is hemorrhaging money. They're 3 months away from bankruptcy, Emma. He's been cooking the books to hide losses from investors. And there's a clause in the company bylaws that I found buried in the incorporation documents. If the CEO is involved in any kind of public scandal or criminal investigation, the board has the authority to force him out immediately. Emma, if we can expose him, if we can prove the IVF fraud and bring criminal charges, we can take away everything he has, his company, his money, his power. And maybe, just maybe, we can save your baby." For the first time in days, Emma felt something other than despair. She felt the faintest flicker of hope, small and fragile, but real. "How do we do that?" she asked. "How do we expose him?" "We find his accomplice," Marcus said. "Victoria Reed, Tori. She knows everything. She was part of the fraud, and I'm betting she's not as loyal to James as she pretends to be. If we can get her to flip, if we can convince her to testify against him in exchange for immunity, we can bring him down." Rachel nodded, pulling out her laptop. "I've already started researching her. She's 26 years old, works as James's executive assistant, has an active social media presence where she posts luxury lifestyle content. She's living way beyond her salary. I pulled some records through a contact at the IRS. She's received over $200,000 in unexplained deposits over the past year, all from shell companies tied to James Harrison." "So he was paying her off," Emma said slowly, "for the affair and for helping him with the fraud." "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "And that means she's vulnerable. If we threaten her with criminal prosecution, if we offer her a deal, she might turn on him to save herself. People like Tori care about one thing: self-preservation. We just need to make her more afraid of us than she is of James." "Can we do that?" Emma asked. "Can we actually make this work?" "We have to try," Rachel said, "because right now it's our best shot at winning this fight." Marcus Blake arranged a meeting with Victoria Reed through an intermediary who claimed to be a journalist writing an expose on unethical practices in the fertility industry. Tori, always hungry for attention and publicity, agreed to meet at a trendy coffee shop in Soho. Marcus wore a wire. Emma and Rachel listened from a car parked across the street, Emma's heart pounding so hard she thought it might wake the baby. "So, Victoria," Marcus began after ordering coffee, setting his phone on the table as if to take notes, but actually to record every word. "Tell me about your experience working with James Harrison. What's it like being inside the tech world at such a high level?" Tori smiled, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. "James is brilliant, truly visionary. He's going to change the world with Harrison AI. The platform we're developing is unlike anything that's ever existed." "Is that so?" Marcus asked casually, stirring his coffee. "Because I've been hearing some troubling rumors, financial irregularities, investor complaints. Some people are saying the company is on the verge of collapse, and James has been hiding it with creative accounting." Tori's smile faltered slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Harrison AI is extremely successful. Come on, Victoria, Marcus said, his voice hardening slightly. You're his right hand, his confidant. You know everything that happens in that company. The shell companies he set up to move money around, the offshore accounts, the fake revenue reports he presented to the board. You helped him hide it all, didn't you? You're not just his mistress, you're his accomplice. Tori stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm not talking to you, this interview is over. Sit down, Victoria, Marcus said, his voice now cold as steel. Because if you walk out of here right now, the next conversation you have will be with federal prosecutors from the SEC. I have your financial records, all of them. I know James paid you over $200,000 in the past year to keep quiet about various criminal activities. And I know you falsified consent documents at the IVF clinic to help him commit reproductive fraud and against his wife. So you're going to sit down and you're going to tell me everything. Or you're going to prison for conspiracy to commit fraud, both financial and reproductive. Your choice, Wonderbon. In the car, Emma held her breath. Everything depended on this moment. Tori sat down slowly, her face pale beneath her perfect makeup. If I talk, James will destroy me. You don't understand what he's capable of. James is going to destroy himself, Marcus said. The question is whether you go down with him or whether you save yourself. I can offer you full immunity from prosecution. I have connections with the district attorney's office. You testify against James, you tell the complete truth about everything, and you walk away free. But you have to decide right now. Because I'm walking out of here in 60 seconds, and this offer expires with me. Tori was silent for a long moment that felt like an eternity. Then she started talking. She told Marcus everything, and it was worse than Emma had imagined. Tori explained how James had approached her 2 years ago with a plan to create an heir without actually having to have a child with his wife. He needed a baby for optics, for his board of directors, who questioned his stability and long-term commitment. But he did not want to be tied to Emma forever, and he certainly did not want to actually father a child with her. He told me Emma was just a placeholder, Tori said, her voice flat. Someone presentable and respectable enough to make him look good, but ultimately dispensable. He planned to divorce her the moment the baby was born and the custody paperwork was in order. And you went along with it, Marcus said. You donated your eggs for this plan. He said we'd be together, Tori admitted. And for the first time, Emma heard something like vulnerability in her voice. He said after he divorced Emma, we'd get married and raise the baby as ours. He promised me everything. But then I found out he's been seeing someone else, a 22-year-old model named Cassandra. He's using her the same way he used me, the same way he used Emma. And I realized I'm just another disposable woman to him. Tell me about the IVF fraud, Marcus pressed. How did you get Emma to sign those consent forms? James bribed the clinic director, a man named Dr. Kenneth Marsh, paid him $50,000 to alter the consent forms and make sure Emma signed documents that classified her as a gestational carrier instead of a biological mother. Emma thought she was signing standard IVF paperwork. She had no idea what she was actually agreeing to. And the financial fraud at Harrison AI? The company is bankrupt, Tori said, the words tumbling out now. Has been for months. James has been embezzling money from the operating budget to fund his lifestyle. The penthouses, the cars, the private jets, all of it is paid for with investor money that was supposed to go toward product development. When the auditors finally catch up with him, and they will, he's going to be facing decades in prison for securities fraud. In the car, Emma listened to Tori's confession and felt a strange mixture of rage and pity. Tori had been used too in her own way, but that did not absolve her of her role in trying to steal Emma's child. We have enough, Rachel said, turning off the recording equipment. This testimony, combined with the financial records Marcus has gathered, is enough to bring criminal charges against both James and the clinic director. Emma, we can win this. We can actually win. For the first time in weeks, Emma let herself hope. James Harrison's world began to collapse on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:42 a.m. He was in his office at Harrison AI headquarters, preparing for a critical board meeting where he planned to announce the revolutionary new product that would save his failing company, when 2 FBI agents walked through his door and served him with a federal warrant. Financial fraud. securities fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. The charges were extensive and devastating, each one carrying potential prison time measured in decades. By noon, the news was everywhere. Every tech blog, every financial news network, every major newspaper carried the story. Tech billionaire James Harrison arrested for massive fraud. The stock price of Harrison AI, already precarious, plummeted to nearly zero. Investors pulled out in a panic. Partners terminated their contracts. The board called an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove James as CEO and to cooperate fully with federal investigators. Emma watched the news from her mother's living room in Fairview, her hands resting on her swollen belly. She was 8 months pregnant now, enormous and uncomfortable, so close to her due date that every day felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. "It's working," Rachel said, sitting beside Emma on Grace's old couch. "The judge has agreed to an emergency custody hearing tomorrow morning. We're going to present Tori's testimony, the IVF fraud evidence, the financial crimes documentation." "Emma, I genuinely believe we can get full custody. James's entire defense has collapsed." "What about the gestational carrier agreement I signed?" Emma asked. "The documents that say I'm just a surrogate?" "Those documents were obtained through fraud and coercion. Dr. Marsh, the clinic director, has already agreed to testify that James bribed him to alter your consent forms. Without those fraudulent documents, the default custody goes to the biological mother, which legally is Tori since it was her egg. But Tori has signed an affidavit relinquishing all parental rights in exchange for immunity, which means you, as the woman who carried and birthed the child, have the strongest legal claim to custody. The law recognizes gestational mothers as having parental rights, especially in cases of fraud." Emma wanted desperately to believe it, but she had been disappointed too many times. "What about James? Can he still fight this?" "He can try," Rachel said, "but his legal team just abandoned him. No reputable law firm wants to represent someone facing this many federal charges. He's alone now, and with Tori testifying against him, he has no defense. Emma, I think you're going to get your daughter back." The hearing the next day was held in a family court in Manhattan. Emma made the drive with Marcus and Rachel, her mother insisting on coming despite Emma's protests. "I need to see that man's face when he loses," Grace said firmly. "I need to look him in the eye." James arrived in handcuffs, flanked by federal marshals. He looked haggard and defeated, his expensive suit wrinkled, his usually perfect hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. When he saw Emma, visibly pregnant and sitting with her legal team, his expression hardened into something ugly. "You did this," he said as the marshals led him past her. "You destroyed everything I built. You destroyed me." "No," Emma said quietly, meeting his eyes without flinching. "You destroyed yourself. All I did was refuse to be your victim." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Brennan, reviewed the evidence with excruciating thoroughness. She listened to Tori's testimony, read Dr. Marsh's confession, examined the falsified consent forms, studied the financial fraud charges. The hearing took 4 hours, and by the end of it, Judge Brennan's expression was one of barely contained fury. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade, "in my 30 years on the bench, I have presided over thousands of cases involving custody disputes, parental rights, and family law. I have never, not once in 3 decades, seen such a blatant and egregious disregard for the law, for basic human decency, and for the sanctity of human reproduction. You defrauded your wife. You conspired with a medical professional to commit reproductive coercion. You used a woman's body as an incubator without her informed consent. You committed multiple felonies to cover your crimes and to maintain your public image. You are, without question, one of the most morally bankrupt individuals I have ever encountered in my courtroom." James started to speak, but Judge Brennan silenced him with a look. "I am terminating your parental rights effective immediately," she continued. "You will have no contact with the minor child, no visitation rights, no say in any decisions regarding her upbringing, education, or welfare. Furthermore, I am granting full, sole, permanent custody to Mrs. Emma Collins. Additionally, I am awarding her $10 million in damages for emotional distress, reproductive coercion, and fraud. Finally, I am ordering a criminal investigation into the IVF clinic and recommending that the state medical board revoke Dr. Marsh's license permanently. She looked at Emma. Mrs. Collins, I am deeply sorry for what you have endured. No woman should ever be used in this manner. I hope this ruling provides you with some measure of justice and closure. Your daughter is legally yours. No one can take her from you. James lunged forward, shouting, his composure completely shattered. You can't do this. That's my child. I paid for everything. I planned everything. You can't take her from me? That child, Judge Brennan said coldly, is not yours in any way that matters legally, biologically, or morally. You have no claim to her. Now remove this man from my courtroom before I charge him with contempt as well. The marshals dragged James away, still shouting, his protests echoing down the hallway as Emma sat frozen, unable to fully process what had just happened. Emma, Rachel said, her voice breaking with emotion. You won. You're getting your daughter. She's yours. Emma started to cry, tears of relief so profound she could barely breathe through them. 2 weeks after the custody hearing, Emma went into labor at 3 o'clock in the morning. Grace drove her to Fairview Regional Hospital while Marcus followed behind in his car, ready to stand guard if somehow James found a way to escape federal custody and come after them. But James did not come. He was in a federal detention facility awaiting trial on multiple counts of fraud, facing a potential sentence of 20 years or more. Emma gave birth to Lily Grace Collins at 6:17 a.m. after 14 hours of labor that left her exhausted and exhilarated and more grateful to be alive than she had ever been. When the nurse placed the tiny screaming baby in Emma's arms for the first time, Emma looked down at her daughter's perfect face and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. Hi, Lily, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm your mama, and I promise you, I will never let anyone take you from me. I will protect you with everything I have for the rest of my life. Lily opened her eyes, dark blue and unfocused, and seemed to look right at Emma. Then she stopped crying and made a small, satisfied sound that went straight to Emma's heart. Grace stood beside the hospital bed, crying happy tears. She's perfect, Emma. She's absolutely perfect. She is, Emma agreed, unable to stop staring at her daughter's tiny fingers, her delicate eyelashes, the way her chest rose and fell with each breath. And she's mine. She's really mine. Marcus stepped into the room, and when he saw the baby, this tough former detective who had seen everything, his eyes filled with tears. She's beautiful, Emma. You did good, kid. Over the next few weeks, as Emma recovered and adjusted to life as a new mother, the full extent of James's crimes came to light. Federal prosecutors brought charges not just for the financial fraud, but also for reproductive coercion, conspiracy, and bribery. The trial made national headlines. Almost like he'd testify, and she did, holding Lily in her arms as she told the jury about the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. James was convicted on 14 counts. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. Victoria Reed, who had testified against him, received full immunity as promised. Her reputation was destroyed, her influencer career over, but she avoided prison. She left New York and disappeared from public life entirely. Dr. Kenneth Marsh, the clinic director, lost his medical license and was sentenced to 5 years in prison for his role in the fraud. And Emma Collins moved forward with her life. She used part of the settlement money to buy a small house in Fairview, a 2-bedroom cottage on Maple Street with a porch swing and a fenced backyard perfect for a child to play in. It was nothing like the Manhattan penthouse, which had been sold to pay James's legal fees and restitution to his investors. It was better. It was home. Emma went back to teaching, taking a position at Fairview Elementary School. Her kindergarten classroom was bright and cheerful, filled with books and art supplies, and the laughter of 5-year-olds who called her Miss Emma again, who had no idea their teacher had survived something that would have broken many people. Grace helped with childcare, doting on her granddaughter with a fierce love that made Emma's heart ache in the best possible way. Lily was a happy baby, quick to smile, curious about everything, strong and healthy and perfect. Emma's life was not easy. Being a single mother with a demanding and a traumatic past was hard work. But she was free. She was safe. She was surrounded by people who genuinely loved her. not people who saw her as useful or disposable. And slowly, painfully, she healed. 3 years after Emma won custody of Lily, on a cold November afternoon with snow just beginning to fall, there was a knock on her door. Emma answered it to find a woman standing on her porch, nervous and pale, with auburn hair and green eyes that looked haunted in a way Emma recognized from her own mirror during the darkest days. "Emma Collins?" the woman asked hesitantly. "Yes, can I help you?" The woman held out a folder with shaking hands. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. I was James Harrison's first wife." Emma's heart stopped. His first wife. He told me he had never been married before. "He lied to you about a lot of things," Sarah said quietly. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you. It's about James. It's about what he did to both of us." Emma let her in, her mind reeling. They sat in the living room while Lily played with blocks in the corner, oblivious to the tension. "I was married to James for 3 years, Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper. "This was 8 years ago, before Harrison AI became successful, when he was just starting the company. We tried to have children, but I couldn't get pregnant naturally, so we did IVF." Emma's stomach dropped. "Let me guess, he told you it was his sperm, but it wasn't." Sarah nodded, tears filling her eyes. "He used a donor without telling me. I didn't find out until after our son was born. When I discovered the truth and confronted him, he divorced me immediately, took my son, and paid me off to stay quiet. I signed a non-disclosure agreement. If I told anyone what he did, I would lose the settlement money and any legal chance of ever seeing my son again." "Where is your sweet now?" Emma asked gently. "I don't know," Sarah said, breaking down. "James disappeared with him after the divorce. Changed his name, moved out of state, made it impossible for me to find them. I've been looking for 7 years with no luck." Emma felt sick. "How many women were there, Sarah? How many others did he do this to?" "I don't know for certain," Sarah admitted. "But after James was arrested and the news coverage started, I began digging into his past. I've found at least 2 other women. Women he married, impregnated through IVF fraud, and then discarded when they were no longer useful. You're the only one who fought back, Emma. You're the only one who won." Sarah pulled papers from the folder. "I'm filing a class action lawsuit against the fertility industry, and specifically against the network of clinics that enabled James's crimes. I'm also fighting to regain custody of my son now that James is in prison, and I'm asking you to be the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit. You're the only one with a public platform now. You're the only one people will listen to. The Lilly Foundation you started has already helped dozens of women escape reproductive coercion. Your voice matters in a way mine doesn't." Emma looked at Lily, who was happily stacking blocks into a wobbly tower. She thought about the years of pain she had endured. She thought about finally being able to move on, to leave the past behind. But then she thought about Sarah's son, stolen and hidden. She thought about the other women, silenced and afraid. She thought about all the women who might come after them if someone did not stand up and fight for systemic change. "How many women do you think there are?" Emma asked. "Total, across all the clinics and all the years. Based on what I've uncovered as so far, at least 5 that I can prove, but I think there are dozens more who are too scared to come forward." Emma took a deep breath, looking at her daughter. Lily glanced up and smiled, holding up a block proudly. "Mama, look." "I see, baby. That's beautiful." Emma turned back to Sarah. "Then let's find them all, and let's make sure this never happens to anyone else again." 6 months later, Emma stood on the steps of the federal courthouse in Manhattan, surrounded by 8 women ranging in age from 25 to 40, all survivors of James Harrison's network of lies and fraud. The press was everywhere, cameras flashing like strobe lights, reporters shouting questions. Emma held Lily's hand tightly and stepped up to the microphone. "My name is Emma Collins," she said, her voice steady and clear. 3 years ago, I discovered that my husband, James Harrison, had defrauded me, used my body without my consent, and planned to steal my child. I fought back, and I won. But I'm not the only survivor. The women standing with me today have endured reproductive coercion, IVF fraud, and systematic abuse by men who saw us as objects to be used and discarded. We are here to demand justice, accountability, and legislative change to protect future generations of women from these crimes. The crowd erupted in applause. Emma saw Sarah crying tears of relief and vindication. She saw Rachel Williams, her lawyer, smiling with pride. She saw her mother and Marcus at the edge of the crowd, both beaming, and she looked down at Lily, who was staring up at her with hiding and trusting eyes. "What are we doing, Mama?" Lily asked. "We're making sure the bad people can't hurt anyone else ever again," Emma said. "Are you scared?" Emma thought about the question. Was she scared? Of the cameras, the attention, the years of legal battles ahead? Maybe, but fear was no longer the thing that defined her or controlled her choices. "No, baby," Emma said, lifting Lily into her arms. "I'm not scared anymore. Not even a little bit." The trial that followed took 8 months and made national headlines every single day. The IVF clinic network was shut down permanently. Dr. Marsh and 3 other doctors involved in the fraud ring were convicted and sent to prison. James Harrison, already serving 20 years for fraud, received an additional 15 years for reproductive coercion and conspiracy, effectively ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Sarah Mitchell won custody of her son, now 9 years old, in an emotional reunion covered by every major news outlet in the country. And Emma Collins became a voice for women everywhere who had been silenced, used, and discarded by powerful men who thought they were untouchable. She wrote a book about her experience titled The Perfect Lie: One Woman's Fight Against Reproductive Coercion. It became a bestseller. She spoke at conferences and universities. She testified before Congress, advocating for stronger federal laws protecting women from reproductive fraud. The Lilly Foundation grew exponentially, helping hundreds of women escape abusive situations and fight for custody of their children. But through all of it, the most important part of Emma's life remained beautifully simple. Every evening she came home to her small house in Fairview. She cooked dinner with her mother, teaching Lily how to crack eggs and stir batter. She read bedtime stories, doing all the funny voices that made Lily giggle. She sat on the porch swing on warm summer nights, watching fireflies while Lily chased them with squeals of delight. One night, as Emma tucked Lily into bed, her daughter asked the question Emma had been preparing for but still dreaded. "Mama, do I have a daddy?" Emma had practiced her answer 100 times, consulted with child psychologists, read every parenting book about having difficult conversations. But looking at her daughter's innocent face, the truth felt simpler than she expected. "You have me," Emma said, stroking Lily's hair. "You have Grandma Grace, who loves you more than anything. You have Uncle Marcus, who would do anything to protect you. You have a whole family of people who chose to love you, who fought for you, who will always be there for you. And Lily, that's more valuable than anything else in the whole world. Love that's chosen is stronger than any other kind." Lily thought about this seriously, her little face scrunched up in concentration. Then she smiled. "Okay, I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby girl. More than you'll ever know." Amanda Adenau. Emma turned off the light and stood in the doorway, watching her daughter fall asleep, feeling a peace she had never imagined possible during those dark months when everything seemed lost. She thought about the woman she used to be, the scared, trapped, broken woman who had stood in a Manhattan penthouse and wondered if her life was over, if she would ever feel safe or whole again. That woman was gone, transformed by fire into someone stronger. Emma closed Lily's door gently and walked to the living room. She made herself a cup of tea and sat on the couch, looking at the photos on the wall. Lily's first steps, her 3rd birthday party with chocolate cake smeared everywhere. Her first day of preschool, proud and nervous and excited. A life built on truth instead of lies. A life built on love instead of control. A life built on her own terms, on her own strength. Emma had lost everything once. The marriage, the money, the life she thought she wanted. But she had gained something infinitely more valuable. She had gained herself. She had gained her freedom. She had gained her daughter. And she had learned that the strongest kind of power comes not from wealth or status or other people's validation, but from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone take that away. She picked up her laptop and opened the draft of her next book, a guide for women navigating custody battles and reproductive rights. There was so much work left to do, so many women who still needed help. But tonight, Emma was just a mother whose daughter was safe and asleep down the hall, and that she thought was everything. So what do you think? Did Emma get the justice she deserved? Was her revenge too cold? Or was it exactly what James Harrison had coming? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, if you were in Emma's position, what would you have done differently? Would you have fought, or would you have taken the money and walked away? And here's something to think about. Sarah mentioned there were at least 5 other women. Who do you think they are? Should I tell their stories next? If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, relief, anything, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It tells me you want more stories like this. Stories about people who refuse to stay down when life knocks them over. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a friend going through a hard time. Maybe it's someone who needs a reminder that they're stronger than they think. This story might be exactly what they need today. And if you're not subscribed yet, click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I post stories like this every week, real human drama about love, betrayal, justice, and survival. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when their backs are against the wall. Drop a comment and let me know. What should I cover next? More revenge stories? Courtroom battles? Shocking family secrets? You tell me, and I'll make it happen. Thanks for listening to Emma's story. Remember, you're stronger than you know, you're more valuable than anyone who treats you as disposable, and you deserve a life built on truth, not lies. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong out there.